Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered, Memphis Mafia on the Circle G. And today, we're going to return to the ranch, to where Elvis has gathered his friends, and they're sharing in all kinds of blissful events like family picnics, horse rides, just lovely times together. And we're going to hear some more stories about that. But first, we're going to jump about 18 months ahead to July 31st, 1969, the day of Elvis's greatest triumph, his return to live performances. And after that live performance, which took the world by storm, he still had 2 more weeks of performances that he needed to give in order to complete the engagement. And he was concerned, but he'd received a telegram from a friend. And this song that I wrote is the story of the letter that he wrote back to that friend, thanking him for the telegram.
The lights came down on Vegas gold. July heat, a crown retold. Applause like thunder, stars align. But one true friend was not in line. A telegram, a quiet grace from 12 years deep, a loyal face. I read your words, they calmed the flame. In all that noise I spoke your name. I wish you could have been here, Gary. The velvet night, the roaring crowd. But in my heart your voice was steady, a whisper soft, a faith unbowed. 4 more weeks this fire will fade. I'll find my way back through the haze to Graceland's porch where silence sings and friendship wears no stage or wings. The suits, the gifts, the famous hands, they cheered the king, they made demands. But in the mirror doubt would stare, and only you knew what was there. I wrote you lines in trembling ink, not for the press, not for the drink, just for the man who saw me hold beyond the glitter, past the road. Say hello to everyone, I'll be home when this is done. The curtain falls, the echo fades, but you remain my serenade. 4 more weeks this fire will fade. I'll find my way back through the hay to Graceland's porch where silence sings and friendship wears no stage or wings.
Welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Marion, Terry, Deb, Keith, Anna. Today we return to the Circle G. Now we're going to hear from the Memphis Mafia. And we're going to go all the way back to the beginning again, because we're going to hear some more detailed accounts from people that we haven't really heard from yet. We knew they were there, but they haven't spoken from the archive to us. And today is their day. One of those people is going to be Marty Lacker. And on screen, we can see a picture of Elvis in 1967. That's the year that all these stories are taking place. The year that he bought the Circle G. And the dream really didn't last all that long. But it was so powerful that even today, we're still talking about it. And a lot of fans, I believe, feel that it lasted for years. But it was really just a matter of months. And Marty Lacker says, the ranch was a natural evolution of other things that were going on at Graceland in 1966. It started when Elvis bought Priscilla a 4-year-old black quarter horse, Domino. But she complained that she didn't have anybody to ride with. So Elvis bought himself a Palomino, Rising Sun, which Jerry found for him somewhere. Marty's recollection is interesting because it includes Jerry, but it forgets Jerry's wife or girlfriend at the time, Sandy, and that it was really Sandy that was riding with Priscilla. She's the one that needed another horse. And after that, that's when Elvis decided to get a horse. And then he needed Jerry to be out there with him. And then it could be a couples thing. But Marty doesn't really remember Sandy or doesn't mention her within his recollections. And Billy Smith, he also remembered. And he said Elvis didn't just stop at horses. He got into all this farm equipment. One night, he was in the mood to go shopping, and he decided to go to Sears. We loaded up the car and went to the Southland Mall. People just fell over, to see Elvis Presley in the hardware department at Sears, gathering up hammers and nails and hinges for the pasture gates. And so this is before Circle G. Elvis has just really gotten into the horse riding. And we know that he's gotten into the clothing and the costuming, because he does that with everything that he gets into. Alan Fortas even once said, Marty Lacker asked him where Elvis was, and Alan said, well, he's upstairs in bed watching the football games, and he's wearing his jersey and helmet. So when Elvis did things, he liked to dress the part. But now he's gone even farther, and he's gathering all the accessories, and the very realistic accessories. He's getting the hardware that it takes to personally and physically fix the pasture gates, which is a task that the previous year he would never have thought of doing. Not himself. And Marty Lacker also says, one day he saw everybody standing around watching them ride. So he went wild and bought everybody a horse, even Vernon. I didn't want a horse. So Marty's saying Elvis is out there riding around at Graceland, and he's always got his guys with him, but now they don't even know what to do. They're just standing there watching him as he rides around in the field. And as with all activities, Elvis realizes, hey, this is really not as much fun on my own as it could be if I had friends that were doing it with me. So he decides it'd be great if everybody had a horse. So he even gets one for his dad. And Marty Marty didn't like to ride things like motorcycles. And he didn't want to ride horses. But Elvis wants everyone to do what he's doing. And so this is just an amusing anecdote about that. And Keith is saying that Elvis was a Cleveland Browns football fan. That's true. But he was also a Memphis Grizzlies fan. And I've got some stories about the Memphis Grizzlies that maybe one day I'll be able to tell you guys. And Marion's saying, funny story, I'm just imagining Elvis with a helmet in front of the TV. And when I heard that story, I also imagined Elvis in front of the TV, but I saw him as a kid. Like from the moment he could see it, or even listening to the radio as a child, if he was listening to a Western, I bet he was wearing a cowboy hat and maybe a vest, you know, the way that kids do. And he would have heard Superman on the radio as a child, and we know he was in the comic books, so perhaps he wore a blanket as a cape a few times. But we definitely know that when he did things, like when he first began to buy the motorcycles, when he could afford them, he bought the full leather outfits and such that went with them. I mean, he bought the leather caps, even some of the helmets. He loved all the stuff that went with whatever it was he was doing at the time. And Marty also says that he outfitted all the guys and their wives or girlfriends in chaps and boots and hats. And that Marty says that Billy Smith says it was like a Roy Rogers, Dale Evans look-alike contest when everybody got together. And I guess it was. So Roy Rogers was a famous cowboy, the king of cowboys. And Elvis did meet Roy Rogers one time in the middle of a lake in a boat named the Bugs Bunny with Mel Blanc, because Mel Blanc was the voice of Bugs Bunny and he owned that speedboat. Roy Rogers was driving another speedboat. And they met out in the middle of the lake and they had a grand old time. And if you want to hear more about that particular story, you can find it out on the channel. And it's a great story because Mel Blanc's son was also there. And he's still with us. And he's the one that has told the story. And that's where most of the details come from. Dale Evans, even I don't know who Dale Evans is. I believe that was another famous Western guy, but I don't know. So maybe I need to look that up before the next episode so that we can all find out together. If you know who Dale Evans is, put it in the comments or into the chat. And Marty goes on. Elvis would go out in the barn every day and every night. This barn, which he called House of the Rising Sun, a pun on the name of his horse, hadn't been used in years. He fixed up a little office for himself and wrote the names of the horses on the stalls with a big red marking pen. Now, we know from Charlie Hodge's story that we heard in a previous episode that while he may have marked the name of some horses on the stalls, he also marked the stalls for whose horse was going to be in them. Like there was one for his father's and it said Daddy's. And there was one for Priscilla that said Priscilla. And there was one for Elvis And on it, he wrote, "Mine." Marty says he'd write notes to himself, like what I'm going to buy tomorrow and what I'm going to do tomorrow. And he would clean up the barn and buy new tack, and he just loved it. Got another picture up on the screen. It's also Elvis, 1967. Oh, Keith is saying that Dale Evans is one of the most famous cowgirls, and she was a singer-songwriter. Hey, thank you for coming to the rescue there, Keith. And that makes a lot of sense with the comment now. One of them looks like a cowboy and one of them looks like a cowgirl, and then together they look like these two people. Everybody on the are at Circle G that's riding the horses now looks like these two people. That makes a lot of sense. Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. And this picture on the screen, this is also 1967. Or at least it was printed in a fan magazine for 1967. So it might have been slightly earlier. But I like the shirt that he's wearing because it kind of evokes a Western. Because it's tied together instead of having any buttons at the neck. Although that's maybe more of a Native American styling. It also appears to be made out of corduroy. So a very interesting shirt. And Billy Smith had some things to say about this time period. He said that when they were at Sears, on the way out, Elvis spotted a little 12-horsepower lawn tractor with a small loading wagon. It was the display model, but he had to have it. And when we got home, Elvis wanted everybody to take a ride. So I wonder if any of you ever have been to a Sears. There's not many Sears left, really. But when I was a kid, Sears was a mall anchor. There were 3 or 4 major department stores, and they were at every mall in America. And all the other stores were basically between them, hoping that enough people would come to one of these 3 or 4 major stores that they would be able to pick up a little business from that. And it worked for about 40 years or so. These malls were extremely popular. And Sears, of course, had been around much longer than that. But this was around that time because the Sears that Elvis actually went to in this story was in a mall. So he's in this Sears in a mall, and he sees the lawnmower display, and it's exactly what he wants. So he demands to buy it. And can you just imagine the sales guy saying, "No, this, I don't know what to do. My manager's not here because it's probably at night." And then eventually Elvis is walking out, and his guys, they have the lawnmower and the wagon, and they're loading it into the car. I mean, that is just, and that scene has never appeared in any movie or in any film, any TV movie, any film. And that's crazy, right? Like, that should definitely be one of the scenes that we see. And Nancy's saying, "Hello, Nancy. Thank you so much for coming. That when I was a kid, a series called The Rich People, Sears was the rich people store." That's hilarious. And there's some truth to that because Kmart would have been like the store that I mostly got to shop at. And when we were feeling fancy, that's when we went to Sears. And then we got to walk around the mall. We weren't allowed to buy anything. And even if we were, we couldn't have because I didn't have any money. So I wasn't going to be able to buy anything. And that's why I only remember like having 2 orange Juliuses in my life. But that's an entirely different story. So to get back to this one, Billy says that they're in this Sears, and then they get back to the house. And the wagon wasn't big enough to fool with, but Priscilla and my wife and Jerry's new wife, Sandy, and Alan's wife and another girl, and even Chief, big as he was, Elvis hadn't fired him yet, got in that thing, and Elvis drove. I tried standing on the wagon bar behind him, but it was too small, and I couldn't hold on. So Elvis has got this thing back home, and now he's talked Priscilla and Joe Smith and Sandy Schilling and Joe Fortis. Alan's wife's name is Joe, the same as Billy's wife, so that's kind of a coincidence, but Joe Fortis and another girl. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Chief. Now, Chief is this guy that worked for Elvis and was in the Memphis Mafia for a while, part of that inner circle. I believe his real name, I should have looked this up before I got in here, but I believe his real name was Ray Sidon. And he was just a really big guy, and that he had been hanging around the gates. And every time Elvis went by him, he said, "Hey, Chief," because he recognized him as this really big guy at the gates. And at this period of time, Elvis was apparently calling everybody Chief. He went through these different phases, and his guys went through different phases with him where they called him different things, like boss or E or something like that. They didn't do E very long. And I heard that he hated L, that he did not like to be called L. But they would kind of rotate through these different names and get stuck on him for a while. My boy was one of them. They would go around saying, my boy, over and over to each other. But this time, Elvis was calling everybody Chief. And so they'd drive in and out of the gates, and he'd say, "Hey, Chief." And then he'd said it to him so many times, Chief somehow got inside the gates and came out up to the door, and everybody just assumed he should be there because it seemed like Elvis knew him because he said hi to him all the time. And then Chief just became part of the group. So I don't know that that's really the right story. It's something like that. One of these days I'll tell it exactly like it should, but that gives you an idea of who Chief is. He's a very large gentleman that doesn't talk a lot. And he's in some of the stories, but he's not one of the voices that tends to come out of the archive. So we tend to just see his reflection and his echo around the edges. But he's a very big guy. I kind of think of him as, the guy's name escapes me at this very moment, but he played Lurch on the Addams Family. Very tall gentleman. I don't know that Chief was that big, but all the Memphis Mafia felt that he was a very tall and large guy. And he's in this tiny little wagon, and he's got these 5 girls are in it with him. And Elvis is driving around the lawn at Graceland, which, if you've ever been there, you know that it's kind of sloped. It goes up towards the house. And Elvis says, "Try the front of this thing, Billy. See if you can stay up there." And Billy says, "So I mounted the hood and held onto the gas cap. And of course, since the tractor was new, there wasn't much gas in it. So Elvis headed out the front gate and went right across the street to the service station. You should have seen the look on the attendant's face when he seen Elvis driving, and me on the hood and a wagon full of people behind. So Elvis has driven this little lawn tractor with all these people in this little wagon behind him, and Billy's sitting on the hood of the tractor, this little lawnmower, and now they've driven out across the street. And if you've ever been to Graceland today, that's across the street is where like all the Elvis new exhibits are, and the plane and all that stuff. Well, back then it was a shopping center and it had this gas station in it. And so they've driven across to the gas station, and there's people there that are just filling up their cars like always. And here's Elvis, and he's not in a car, he's driving this little lawnmower, and he's got a wagon on the back, the kind that you normally haul things like lawn clippings and maybe manure or something like that. And Keith has come to my rescue and said, Ted Cassidy. That's exactly the name I was thinking of, Keith. Ted Cassidy. I don't know that Chief was really that tall, but that gives you an idea of how they emotionally felt when Chief was around. Like, he was a very tall, somewhat silent individual. And now he's in the back of this wagon, and they're all over at the gas station. And Billy goes on, and he says, Elvis liked to startle people. So on the way back, he drove through the subdivision behind Graceland, all of us just a-singing, Old MacDonald Had a Farm. That's a pretty great image, too. And if you've ever been to Graceland, you know that just down the street, there's an entrance to that subdivision. And if you go to the end of that subdivision, the end of that street, over on the left, that's Vernon's house, the Dolan Street address. And there used to be a gate in the fence right behind it that connected the two properties, so that Vernon could have access at any time to come and see Elvis, or Elvis could go and visit Vernon, which he did. He used to spend time over in that Dolan Street house, which has a hot tub in the first floor, sunk right into the floor. And they used to spend some time together in there, soaking away a day's worries. Hi, Tammy. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And right next to Vernon's house, right on the corner of that street, because there's another street that tees into it right there, that's Gary Pepper's house. And the song that I played earlier about the telegram, Gary Pepper sent that telegram, and Elvis sent that letter that the song is about back to Gary Pepper. His house was right there next to Dolan. Gary Pepper's father worked security for Elvis, so it was really just another extension of the Graceland property. Elvis didn't own it, but he spent time over there with Gary, and a lot of the payments on that house, came out of money that somehow originated with Elvis. And other portions of that money came from connections to Elvis, because Gary earned money by putting together stories about Elvis and sending them to other fan magazines. And he had started out by doing clippings, and he had made a scrapbook of Elvis, and he had given it to Gladys, and Gladys had invited him to Christmas 1957, very first one at Graceland, and the only Christmas that Gladys ever was at Graceland. So Gary Pepper is a connection right back to the beginning. And they drove right past his house. Now, I don't know if he was living there in 67. I kind of think he was. I don't have the dates of when he lived in that house. And I don't believe Vernon was living on Dolan at that moment, because I think he was still over at the other. So that'd be an interesting thing to do, is to line up that timeline with this story of them driving past singing Old MacDonald Had a Farm. Maybe that's something we can do together soon. But Billy goes on. He's got more to the story. There were some people having a party, so he just pulled the tractor up to their window, and we serenaded the whole bunch. Then Elvis tipped his hat, and we drove off. All those people just stood there with their mouths open. He almost threw me off the front of the tractor a couple of times. I was yelling, "Ride 'em, cowboy!" And the more I yelled, the faster he went, trying to throw me off. We went down this one dip and up a hill, and everybody in the wagon let out a scream. Elvis stopped and looked back, and there they all were, piled up. The wagon had done broke loose and tipped up, and all the girls were on the ground yelling, 'cause Chief was on top and he had him trapped. All 350 to 400 pounds of Chief. He was laughing so hard he couldn't get up. We had to just pull him off. So Elvis has dumped them all in the middle of the road. And this big giant guy Chief, he's rolled right on top of every woman that they know. Every woman that's important to him is trapped underneath this very large Memphis Mafia member. So I got another picture here of Elvis in 1967. And he's just wearing a white shirt with a collar that has buttons. It's a button-down collar. It looks like he's wearing a very simple chain, but it disappears underneath the shirt. And he's got that special little curl to his hair. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Superman, or maybe Captain Marvel Jr. And he's got those smoldering eyes. So this is what it would have been like to see Elvis in person in 1967. About the time he dumped all these people out of his little lawnmower wagon. Now, Jerry Schilling tells more about the time period, and he says, "We kept going out and buying more animals and more gear, and our trips started happening during typical Elvis hours," by which Jerry means the middle of the night. We'd often be down in Mississippi somewhere writing potential purchases at 3 in the morning. On one of those trips, Elvis and Priscilla, Sandy and I, and Alan Fortis went out, driving down to the renowned Lenox Farms in Mississippi to find a Tennessee Walker for Vernon. Now, a Tennessee Walker is a specific kind of horse. So, like, Elvis has a Palomino. They're looking for this Tennessee Walker for Vernon. Jerry says it was just daybreak as we headed back toward Graceland, piled together in that big old double cab pickup truck. Alan was driving, and all of a sudden Elvis told him to pull off the road. When Alan did so, Elvis pointed out the passenger window. Right away, we all saw what he saw. A huge white cross towering over some rolling green hills, as pristine as a golf course. The first rays of sunlight were glinting off a rippling lake in the center of the property, and there was one perfectly quaint little farmhouse close to the road. There was also a for sale sign up. Elvis got that look in his eye, the one that meant he just put a plan together. "Alan," he said, "go knock on the door to that house. Tell them you want to buy this place, and don't tell them it's for me." So we've heard Jerry tell this story before, but he told it slightly differently. So that's just another version from Jerry. Just to give us the full perspective on the events of the day. And Billy Smith said, the way Elvis told it, he just stood there for a few minutes without saying anything. And then he said, this is the most beautiful sight. It's so peaceful. I think it's a good omen. And we've talked in previous episodes about how there is a reoccurring theme that of all the details that change within the stories, one that is extremely consistent is that this cross that was on the land was very important, was vital to this entire chain of events. That nobody would have ever been on the Circle G if that cross had not been there. If Jack Adams, the owner, had not erected that cross as an aid to plane navigation, to aircraft navigation, if he hadn't done that, then Elvis would never have bought this property. And that Elvis bought it because he saw a signal in the cross. He received a message. And he even told Billy Smith a story basically stating that. I think it's a good omen. And Nancy's saying, this is a lot of work. Thanks, Matt. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Hi, Richie. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. And then we're going to get back to some details about the story. Like, how many cattle were there? We'd seen Alan say there was 18. But then we'd seen reports that there were 100 or 200. So the story has changed over time. But here's what Marty Lacker said about it. Marty says, Alan and I started dickering with him, and I brought up the cattle. Now, the him that he's referring to is Jack Adams. And Marty is now in the story. In the previous versions that we've heard, you know, like when Jerry tells the story, it's condensed. And when they find Jack Adams at the airport, they make a deal and Elvis purchases the property. But when Alan tells the story, they found Jack at the airport. Jack listened a little bit to what Elvis was saying and then said, Elvis just used the ranch and used everything on it as if it was yours. Keep it for a few days, couple of weeks, whatever you want to do, and then tell me what you want to do. And after a few days, Elvis said, I want to purchase the property. So they went back and Elvis sent in Alan to negotiate the deal. And then before the deal was negotiated, Elvis burst in and said, we're just going to pay full price, right? We're going to pay it. I want it. But Marty wasn't mentioned, I don't believe, in that previous version. Now Marty's there and he's part of the dickering. He and Alan are now a team that is, they're tag teaming Jack, who is a salesman by nature. He sells aircraft, which are very expensive. So you got to be a really good sales guy in order to sell aircraft. So he knows a lot of tricks of the trade. And Marty says there were 18 head of Santa Gertrudis cattle on the ranch. I knew Elvis didn't need the cattle, and they cost too much to take care of, and we weren't going to be at the ranch that much anyway. So that's an interesting takeaway from Marty, that he believes they're not going to be at the ranch that much. I don't know what that much means in terms of Marty. I don't know why that would affect needing or not needing the cattle. But Marty's determined that Elvis doesn't want the cattle and has an idea that they're not going to be at the ranch that much. So Marty says, I asked Adams how much the cattle were worth. And he said they're worth $75,000 easy, but they're in the price. So I said, I'll tell you what, you keep the cattle and knock the 75 grand off. And Jack said, I can't do that. What am I going to do with them? The auction is 3 months away. So I said, we'll keep them for you for 3 months if you'll come off the price. And then Elvis burst in and determined that they were just going to pay full price to keep the cattle. He said that he talked to his father and that Vernon wanted the cattle. And we had seen Alan earlier who had verified that he also believed Vernon wanted the cattle. So now they've just got it all. But Marty is a little miffed that he'd gotten to this deal, and Alan, we had seen earlier, was also a little miffed that he too had been able to work a deal with Jack. So it seems that together, Alan and Marty had dickered Jack down and were about to get a better price. And then Elvis ran in and he paid the whole thing. Now, I don't know what the actual truth on that is, but we know what the emotional truth is. They felt like there was going to be a better deal, and then there wasn't. And they're saying that it wasn't their fault. They did everything they could. Now, Jerry, for his part, he liked Jack Adams. But then again, he wasn't in on the deal making. But apparently Jerry had been trying to get a pilot's license and had been in a plane wreck. And so he had some fear about going back up in the air. And Jack was all about aircraft. He loved flying and everything about flying. And Jerry says, I even got back up in a small plane. Jack Adams turned out to be a real friendly guy, a dignified gentleman with a warm, open manner. When he heard about my training and my crash, he took me out to Twinkletown Airport, about 5 minutes away from the ranch, and he got me to agree to co-pilot a plane with him. He felt it was important that I get up in a plane again soon and get over the fear of what had happened. We had a nice, smooth flight, and I had no fear at all, as long as Jack was piloting. When we landed, I was about to get out when Jack said, you can do it solo now. You won't feel satisfied if you don't. I took the plane up, feeling a little nervous at first, but Jack had gone over things with me enough that my confidence started to come back. I made it back down, and this time managed to avoid any crosswinds. And with some further encouragement from Jack, went on to log another 40 hours of solo flight time. So Jack, the guy who sells the property, the Circle G to Elvis, he befriends Jerry Schilling and helps Jerry overcome a major fear and hurdle in his life. So that's a little bit about the kind of guy that Jack Adams was. Hi, Linda. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And Keith is saying, I wonder if the fans from Graceland got tips that EP and the Memphis mob are down at the ranch. Oh, yeah. Of course they did. They knew everywhere that he was. through some kind of fan radar. And Nancy's saying that she doesn't think there were a lot of fans at Circle G. I think that there were a few of the diehards that would park across the street from the entrance, and they would hang out there, like in their cars and stuff. But it was more like at his house in Hollywood, where it wasn't as large a number as would come out to Graceland. But there would be a few of the diehards, I believe, would still be out there. But the trailers were far back from the road and the entrance and the visibility, and he had the 10-foot high fence. So he had insulated the property from those fans. And I don't believe he was engaging with the fans out there. Like, he wasn't going across the street and saying hi to them or anything. He wasn't nearly as inviting, I don't think, as he was when he was at Graceland or one of the houses in California. And Linda's saying, I don't remember reading that Jerry Schilling was a pilot. Interesting. I think that it's in his book, and it comes before this section where he was talking about this time with Jack Adams, but I don't remember the exact story either. And so I also was surprised when I saw that part of the quote. And Marion's saying that Elvis must have liked Jack. I think the whole amount is a really great gesture. Yeah, and obviously, we're not going to make it to the end of the story in this particular episode, the end of Circle G. So if you guys think that this has been the deepest dive that you've ever seen into Circle G over the course of the last, I think this is the 8th or 9th episode that we've done on Circle G, full hour. So we still got a little bit more to go on this hour. But if you think that this is the deepest one ever, put a comment, throw it into the chat. Make sure you give me a like, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the notification button so that you don't have to live in fear that you'll miss the next Hillbilly Cat History episode. But I think this is the deepest dive that anyone's ever, especially on YouTube, ever done into the Circle G. But I'm going to give away some secrets. You know, people like to say things about how much money he spent at this ranch. He makes almost all of it back. Almost twice. Yes, that's right. So he doesn't just make it back once. He makes some more on top of it. So he does make a profit off of this ranch. He certainly doesn't lose money. This ranch is truly an investment. And over the course of a short period of time, it doesn't reap him giant financial benefits, but at the same time, it doesn't lose a lot of money either. So there's a lot of spectacle when you throw around money in these denominations, and it becomes very easy to become trapped in the numbers and the spectacle of the numbers and think, oh my gosh, and you've got the Memphis Mafia constantly saying, and others, about the amount he was spending while he was here. Well, most of that stuff gets auctioned off and he makes the money back, and he sells the property and makes the money back. The property ends up reverting back to him, and he gets to sell it again, and he makes the money. So he does make money, but it's more convoluted even than that. And we'll talk about it when we get there, but Elvis is no financial dummy, even though he spends a lot, and neither is his father. Vernon is just so much smarter than anyone has ever given him credit for, and he gathered a lot of those brains, a lot of his tricky financial maneuvering directly from the Colonel, and these three together, they didn't lose at anything. They didn't lose at anything in their lives. Once they all three got together, they became winners, and they just won and won and won, and they just did greater and bigger things. And it was Elvis that was the star player in the three. You know, he's the one that was taking him to the top. But he definitely couldn't have done it without Vernon. And I personally don't think he could have done it without the Colonel. But we could argue that out. Although I'll never be arguing on this channel. I just show the facts. And everybody gets to have their own opinion. And everybody gets to walk away with their own opinion because we look at the source material and then we all get to make our own decisions. So let's get back into this story a little bit because I'm off onto a rant and outside the territory. I've left the ranch. But it was a good time for that rant because we're now at Marty and Vernon. And this is a little bit about how Marty felt about Vernon. And it has to do with things that happened as they bought the ranch. And Linda says, I'm a retired accountant, and Vernon seems to always be portrayed in a dim light. I think that's true, Linda. I think he did things that, as an accountant, you could verify were very, very financially difficult. They were tricky. They were paperwork tricky. And Keith's saying, wasn't Marty an accountant at one time? Marty did stuff with numbers, and he worked as an accountant for Elvis, but I don't believe Marty was like credentialed as an accountant. I think he was good with numbers. I could be wrong, but I think it's like Joe Esposito. They had life experience. Like Joe had done payroll in the Army. So he wasn't a trained accountant, but you got to learn a lot about accounting procedures if you're going to run the payroll. And Nancy's saying that she wishes Elvis had kept the Circle G. He seemed happy there. And Terry's saying that this is a great video. There's a lot of interesting stories. And Richie's saying, well done. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate that. I know you two know a lot about Elvis. So if you like it, then it must be pretty good. And Linda saying, AI says Jerry was not a licensed pilot, so I doubt it. I agree with that, Linda. He says he got the 40 hours. You need a lot more than just another 40 hours. So I don't think he ever amassed the solo flight hours to get the license. Those were all training hours. In my opinion. Again, I don't know anything. I'm not a specialist. I don't have any special training in Elvis. I'm not qualified in any way. So anybody who has an opinion, your opinion is as good as mine. And Linda's also saying that she doesn't think Marty was a licensed accountant, but he did try to give advice, and that's about what we're about to see. So let me read this story. Marty says, Elvis was sitting in the den with his father, and he said, Daddy wants the cattle, and I want the place. We'll pay the price. It was okay for Vernon to use Elvis's money, but not for Elvis to use Elvis's money. Vernon wanted to be the gentleman farmer because he never amounted to anything on his own. Here was a guy in charge of all Elvis's personal business who could barely read and write and who prided himself on being a big horse trader, but he couldn't trade anything. I think they even put Graceland up for collateral. The day before we went to talk to Adams, Alan and I called Elvis's attorney, Charles Davis. We told him we were going to try to negotiate with the owner, and we wanted him to go with us. And Davis said, what do you want me for? I'm just his attorney. That's the kind of person Vernon chose to represent Elvis. So this quote is so layered with meaning. And let's just start back at the beginning. Elvis was sitting in the den with his father. So Elvis had sat with Vernon, and he told Vernon, I'm buying this property. And you need to decide whether you want the cattle, you don't want the cattle, how we're going to do the finances, but we're getting the property. I mean, Elvis had decided that the moment he saw the cross. So the choice wasn't, are we getting the property? It's, Daddy, do you want the cattle or do you not want the cattle? and says, Daddy wants the cattle and I want the place. We'll pay the price. So this is before they've even gone to see Jack Adams, before Alan and Marty have stepped foot into Jack Allen's office. They go in there and they begin to dicker, as Marty said, as Alan has said in both of their stories. They're both dickering. They're making a deal. And they've already received instructions. Daddy wants the cattle. I want the place. We'll pay the price. So Elvis told them not to dicker. He told them to go in there and purchase the property. And these are not my words. These are the words straight from Marty. Daddy wants the cattle. I want the place. We'll pay the price. That's what Marty remembers. And then Marty is angry because Elvis apparently was angry that they'd gone in there and tried to negotiate. And Marty says it was okay for Vernon to use Elvis's money, but not for Elvis to use Elvis's money. I'm not even sure what he's referring to there, because they're both spending money. One's about to get the property and the other's going to get the cattle. And they're both very happy. Father and son together. They've teamed up. They're going to make it happen. But Marty has been left out of this. And the part that he has contributed or wanted to contribute has been pushed aside. And they've said, we don't need to save any money, Marty. Elvis is a rich man. We're going in there to pay the full price. And then Marty says, Vernon wanted to be the gentleman farmer because he never amounted to anything on his own. So that is Marty's opinion of Vernon. That is, and it's kind of the world's opinion of Vernon now, because this is what makes it into all the movies, into all the representations of Vernon that are out there. That Vernon never amounted to anything on his own. Now, if you've been going through this series with me, and you've been here since the very beginning when we started with the birth certificate, you know that Vernon's been through quite a bit. And that he has amounted to things. That they did purchase a house at one time, but they lost it. That he brought his family to Memphis. Vernon made that decision. Gladys didn't want to go. Elvis didn't want to go. But what would have happened if they'd stayed in Tupelo? Elvis would have been married by the age of 18, probably to a 16-year-old girl. He might have made it to 19. And it would have been just like his parents. And he would have been trapped in a 2-room shack, just like Vernon and Gladys. And Vernon did not want that for his son. So that's what Vernon accomplished when Marty says he never amounted to anything on his own. It's Vernon and Vernon's support that got Elvis to where he is so that he could have bought that Circle G. And if Marty had said this to Elvis, can you imagine if Elvis had heard that? And this was printed in a book that Marty later received payment for. And this is a piece that many people would defend as the truth. But is it the truth that Vernon wanted to be the gentleman farmer because he never amounted to anything on his own? And there's more to go through with this particular quote, but I'm actually going to leave it here. And we're going to return to it because there are bad feelings that are simmering between Marty and Vernon. And they affect the ranch. And they affect Elvis. And they affect all of 1967. And we're going to see more about that in future episodes. But before we go, I'm going to send us out of here on another song. And if you guys like the songs that are being played, you can find the playlist in the description below. And it's mixed with some rare Elvis tracks that you've probably never heard, songs that Elvis sang that are deep, deep in the archive, but they're now surfacing for all of us here on Hillbilly Cat History. And you all keep taking care of business.
His time came too early, the curtain fell too fast. Before he was ready, before we could grasp the man behind the myth, the ache behind the fame. He wanted something simple, not fortune, not acclaim. 6-3, the threats came down like rain. He spoke of love, not fear, through the shadow and the strain. I wanna live to be old, he said with quiet grace, to remember her love and see our children's face. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a throne. He wanted a family, a place to call home, to be a good man with a heart that could rest, to know he was loved and he'd given it his best. No mansion in the sky, no diamond parade, just the warmth of a hand and the life they made. A whisper of laughter, a child's sleepy sigh, that was the dream he carried inside. He didn't ask for gold, didn't dream of a throne. He wanted a family, a place to call home, to be a good man with a heart that could rest, to know he was loved and he'd given his best.
Snow on the ground, Circle G, love all around. He bought that ranch, opened the gate, said come on in, let's celebrate. Tractor pulling through the snow, laughter rising, spirits glow. Both behind, wives and men, family fun again and again. He wasn't just a star in lights, he was the warmth in winter nights. Kindness wrapped in velvet flame, a heart that never played the fame. He gave us joy, he gave us grace, a piano song in a quiet place. From a jack to a king, in the moonlight ring, he gave us love, he gave us way. Gave us us everything. Riding horses, legs so still, bridge and cross on the quiet hill. Barbecue smoke, stories told, moments more precious than gold. He asked me who I'm dating now, what I dream, what I'll allow. He cared like kin, not just a name. He lived for love, not for acclaim. He wasn't just a voice on stage, he was the soul behind the page. A man who'd sing to heal your day and laugh at midnight, lose away. He gave us joy, he gave us grace, a piano song in a quiet place. From a jack to a king, in the moonlight rain. He gave us love, he gave us grace. Circle G, where the angels sing. He gave us everything. A shadow in the night, famous face, but heart so bright. Couldn't walk the street like you and me, so we built a world where we were free. He gave us joy, he gave us grace, a piano song in a quiet place. From a jack to a king, in the moonlight green. He gave us love, he gave us way. Gave us everything. Yes, he gave us everything.
The lights came down on Vegas gold. July heat, a crown retold. Applause like thunder, stars align. But one true friend was not in line. A telegram, a quiet grace. From 12 years deep, a loyal face. I read your words, they calmed the flame. In all that noise, I spoke your name. I wish you could have been here, Gary. The velvet night, the roaring crowd. But in my heart, your voice was steady. A whisper soft, a faith unbowed. 4 more weeks, this fire will fade. I'll find my way back through the haze to Graceland's porch where silence sings and friendship wears no stage or wings. The suits, the gifts, the famous hands, they cheered the king, they made demands. But in the mirror doubt would stare, and only you knew what was there. I wrote you lines in trembling ink, not for the press, not for the drink, just for the man who saw me hold beyond the glitter, past the road. Say hello to everyone, I'll be home when this is done. The curtain falls, the echo fades, but you remain my serenade. 4 more weeks, this fire will fade. I'll find my way back through the hay to Graceland's porch where silence sings. Friendship wears no stage or wing.